I just want to pick up on a video I made a couple of days ago, or maybe it was yesterday. Anyway, it's to do with women and workers. I call it something like women and workers. And it was to do with primacy of various social and political causes, I suppose, and programs and revolutionary desires. And what I was saying there, citing something that Eve Ensler was talking about, as opposed to some classic Marxist theory, is that if you talk to some people, they will say that the most important fight is the fight for workers' rights. Get the economics of the society right. If you talk to some other people, Eve Ensler was my example of that, they will say, no, the first thing you need to sort out is the emancipation of women, or at least the release of women from cycles of exploitation and violence. And I think it's quite, I don't fall on either side of those. It's an interesting area for me to think about. And I would invite people to join me in that thought. But I've been thinking about it again since, partly prompted by some of the great comments that people have made, and a video by Jedi Master Boo Boo, which really helped to clarify my thinking, which is to do with the difference between primacy and ideas of foundations. Because I think there is a big difference. There's a big difference between saying that that your particular cause, let's call it that, whether it be economic liberation or sexual liberation or gender liberation, whichever one of those causes, there's a big difference from saying yours is primary because it's important, as opposed to saying your cause is primary because it's foundational. And I think that's something I need to sort out for myself, really. I think if you're, let me just see if I can flesh out what I mean by that. Obviously, if these things are just either disconnected completely, there is no relationship, let's say, between gender equality and economic inequality and economic equality. Let's say that those debates are completely unconnected. Then, whether you choose to spend your time on addressing one of those issues or the other is entirely irrelevant in the great global scheme of things. It's down to either personal taste or your own judgment or the judgment of people around you or some set of criteria that you might want to organise. Whether you address one or the other first is irrelevant. If, however, you think that one is foundational, then it does matter. And what I mean by foundational is, if you think that how do I explain this? Yeah, let me attract this from Marxism. If you're a classical Marxist, then you believe, because this is Marxist theory, then you believe that the foundations of society is ultimately economics, particularly the economics which organises access to the means of production, as he says. Basically organises worker relationships between workers and bosses, crudely put. Some people have access to the means of production, they own factories and so on, and other people don't have access to the means of production, so they sell their labour in those factories. And that dynamic relationship is at the root of, and the foundation and the basic elements, the basic building block of society in a Marxist analysis. Everything else, things like the family, like religion, education, entertainment, all of the various structures and institutions that societies produce in Marxism are superstructural elements. They're built on top of the base, which is this economic base. Now that's important, because if you wanted to change society, if you wanted to do something about it, and you were a Marxist, there would be no, a hardline Marxist, strictly speaking, there would be no point in tackling the superstructural elements. You would not go up there and start trying to change religion, even though Marx did say it was the opium of the people, something like that. There's no point in doing that. You wouldn't go up there and try to reorganise families, or you might, but it wouldn't be the key thing you would need to do, because you would just be tinkering with the superstructure. It would be like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. If you were a Marxist, fully fledged, hardcore Marxist, you would want to change the foundations. You would address the economic relationships to the means of production first, and once that's in place, then the superstructure would naturally change as a result of that. So So all of those superstructural elements, which again in Marxism are designed to ensure that the base keeps functioning, all those elements like the family, which in a Marxist analysis is designed to keep workers going to factories by making them have dependents at a home that they have to work for, or like the church, which is again in Marxism is designed to keep people placid and keep people thinking of an afterlife rather than trying to change this one, or like education, which is designed to inculcate the youth of a society into the idea that this is how it's supposed to function. All those superstructural elements in theory would change in a Marxist revolution if you change the base, which, as I said endlessly, is this economic base based on access to the means of production. Now that is an argument for a certain kind of primacy of cause, if you like, of reasons to change society. If you are a hardline Marxist, you would pretty much be obliged to address the economics first, not because it's more important to you personally, and not because it's more important for kind of social reasons. You would need to address it first for purely structural reasons, because that's what the Marxist analysis would demand you do. Okay, so how does that contrast with something else? Well, I suppose if you were following Eve Ensler and a kind of feminist, a certain kind of feminist set of agendas, which is about the destabilisation of patriarchy, the bedrock, foundational, fundamental, basic reality of a society on which various superstructural elements are built isn't economics, it's gender disparities and gender differences. So, for example, in some feminist analysis, actually I can't cite my sources well enough to be able to continue with that, but the basic idea is that patriarchy is the first thing, and the superstructural elements are built on top of patriarchy. So if you were following that kind of line of it, and you're a purist in that, then you would follow Eve Ensler by saying that the first battle that needs to be won is the battle of gender inequalities and the various abuses that fall out of that. I suppose all I'm saying here is it makes it quite difficult, strictly speaking, to be a purist Marxist and a purist feminist who supports that vision of patriarchy at the same time. You would have to find a way of blending it and making some kind of hybrid. A more interesting analysis, probably. I think most of us are probably not entirely wedded to those what is sometimes called grand narratives, those single explanations for why everything's pear-shaped. I think most of us now would recognise that those big stories, those single explanations, are a kind of ambitious early 20th century way of approaching the world, really. And it is much more complex. There's something attractively simple about it, though, isn't there? Those sort the one thing out, and everything else will fall into place. I don't think it's the case, though. Don't know what I'm saying with this, really. I'm not. I guess I'm just resistant to words that end in ist and words that end in archy, like marxist and patriarchy, because they, to me, not that I'm not sympathetic to the ideas that they represent, because I clearly am, it's the tendency to adopt a single explanation, grand narrative model of how you work these things, and the metaphor of society as a building that you've got to change the foundation of first. I think there's better metaphors, better ways of looking at it, and better stories.